Okay.
Yeah, good morning, participants. Today we have another resource person for the session 2 is Lekha Sishna madam. She is a global talent strategist. Topic of her, she would be speaking on being gender smart, understanding gender differences. Is participants, is my voice is okay? Other than that, can anybody please respond? Kiran Mai? Am I audible, ma? Kiran Mai? Yeah.
Yes,
Thank you.
madam, audible.
Yeah. Lekha Shishra is a global talent strategist and consultant and advisor in the areas of leadership, talent, and people success and business strategy. She carries with her over 4 decades of rich global corporate experience across a variety of industries. With the last 2 decades in leadership and CXO positions, she is also a qualified independent board member and now serves on the boards of academic institutions, corporates, and startups. Having been educated at some of the best academic institutions in India, she received her master's in management from the Indian Institute of Management, Bangalore. As a talent strategist, her passion is to help build the brand and increase value propositions of employees, and individuals. She is a recognized trainer, leadership mentor, and consultant, and has also served as a global strategic consultant with the Accor Group in Dubai. She has won numerous awards for her passion and service to the field of HR and talent management. Among these were the Indira Gandhi Priyadarshini Award, HMS HR Manager of the Year, the Asia Pacific HR Women Super Achiever of the Year, Most Influential HR Leader in India, and was listed among the top 100 global HR tech minds at the World HRD Congress. In July 2019, she was recognized as a Visionary Woman Leader 2019 by the reputed business APAC magazine published out of Singapore. She is a popular speaker, a respected management faculty, and is an active member of many national and global associations dealing with professional development and the empowerment of women. So thank you so much, madam, for accepting our invitation and being with us. You can start, madam. Thank you. Madam, you are.
Okay. So now, am I clear now? Thank you so much, Dr. Lakshmi Prabha, for that introduction. My topic today is about being gender smart. And the reason why I thought it's important is because we have quickly emerged into a space where we have both genders in management as well as in the, in our classrooms, etc. Earlier, even teaching was supposed to be something which was many women had joined the profession as teachers in school, but it used to be men who used to be professors and college teachers. That is quickly changing. More and more women have entered the space. It's important, therefore, to understand why is it that men and women think differently, behave differently, and speak differently. Why is it that we have these gaps in communication? So that is the intent of this discussion today. One of my recent trips just before the pandemic hit was actually to Vietnam, where I saw about, these Chi tunnels that were there, where people were stuck in it during the revolution, during the military warfare that they had with Cambodia and the other places. And it was very difficult for the women who were the soldiers to continue to live under the ground, right? So, and the reason was, yes, they get a lot of infections because of it. It's their body changes itself that were there. It also meant that they were unable to, therefore, behave in or do their role very well. But, when you look at things like, for instance, things that require the mental balance or the emotional as well as the brain power, women have always been as good as, if not better than men, right? So what actually is the reason for this? And we see that many men actually find that it's really difficult to sit in a chair. The pandemic has actually caused a lot more problems for men who have been out of a social space working from home than it has for the women. Women have actually found it much easier to be able to continue to work from home because they've been able to multitask and do the other stuff, which otherwise would have occupied their evenings, late evenings, and also their worries of, family or aged people at home or household duties at home, etc. So again, there are different kinds of environmental issues that have also occurred at this time. So I'd like to divide my entire presentation along these ways. One is that we will look at the differences and celebrate them. This is going to hopefully increase the awareness of what makes men and women speak differently, improve the communication between them. And also, I think such kind of understanding will help us to be able to set aside any kind of issues that there are, and therefore, obviously, improve relationships. This is a very common thing that we have seen, and while sometimes people make fun of it, but it's actually quite true. When you leave a woman into a shopping center and you say, all right, I'm going to meet you, the husband drops her off at the main gate and says, okay, I'm going to meet you in 15 minutes at the Gap, and this is what you're going to be doing. Pick up the pair of trousers, and I'll pick you up immediately thereafter. So the man goes directly there, parks the car, comes back there. But the woman, in the meantime, has gone across all the other stores to be able to come to this last, because she knows that's the meeting place, right? So she's bought a lot of other stuff and continued to go. And people think that this is just because she takes a long time in deciding her clothes, which is a fact, she does. But men go directly for a particular item, right? So what makes this difference? Is it really that men are from Mars and women are from Venus? And if you look at this little visual that there is here, it looks like woman is all about beauty and calmness, and men are all about action and aggression and fighting. And then you see it actually playing out in the world around you, and you wonder, could it be true? Are they really different planets that people come from? Now, if you look at the way in which we sit, right, there is also a kind of similarity bias. That means that all men sit in a particular way, most women sit in a particular way. Does that then give a kind of difference in the kind of volume of voice, etc., that there is? What is the difference that we have in the way of speaking? Women are all about description. Men are all about, okay, I did this, we are going here now. This is about that person. The woman is all about, it's such a beautiful day. It's, the person did a great performance. It was a wonderful music show. So there's a lot of adjectives that women add to the way in which they speak. And that's because, again, of their frame. And we'll explain that a little later. If you look at clothes and you look at men and women, and again, you see the cupboards that are there, right? I mean, you'll see the woman's cupboard is always stuffed to the brim. And it's not that she can't give away clothes. She can. Most women can give away clothes, but they don't like to give away clothes which they feel that they can fit into. Even if they've put on a lot of weight now recently, they'll always say, I'm going to be able to lose weight a while later and I will fit back into it. Men are fine. They say that, okay, we just need about 10 shirts and 4 trousers is fine. Anything over and above that, if somebody gives it to me, I will take out some of the old stuff. And therefore, you'll always find that a man's cupboard is very, very sparsely filled and a woman's cupboard is usually overfilled, right? If you go to a car, to buy a car, you'll see that the way in which the salespeople are going about things are very different from the way in which the women are going to, that is when the salesperson is talking to a man or a woman. For a man, he would go directly into, okay, what is it in the car, pick up the hood, look at the engine, understand about the, let's say, the variable cost of running it, what is the speed it can go to, how much is the cost of servicing. For a woman, it will be about comfort, it will be about color, it will be about how easy it is to drive, what's the kind of space that there is inside. Very different parameters of decision making, right? And again, please, when I talk of men and women, I would like to very quickly make one statement that these are generalizations that are made. There will always be exceptions. When you look at the movies, which are supposed to be a reflection of society, I remember seeing a movie, Arjun Reddy, I think it was, right? And it was Kabir in Hindi. And I was very disturbed with the way in which they showcased men. And I think that films are actually projecting a different sort of man and a different sort of women. And unfortunately, since they are supposed to be a reflection of society, many people feel that it's okay for a man to take this high-handed approach or a very aggressive approach with a woman around. So that is one point I want to state. The other point I'd like to also bring out is about the metrosexual male. Earlier, it was not okay. People never thought of a man going to a parlor or a salon for a facial or a pedicure or a manicure. His haircut was usually even okay, on the roadside with the barber. Very, very simple to do. But now with the metrosexual male emerging, there are different ways of, the dress itself. If you look at the colors today that men wear, the kind of shirts that they wear, the designs and the fashion for them, the fact that many men have gone into earrings, which is not just from the religious perspective in the South, for instance, but it is also that they think it's good. Jewelry for men has become a new norm, longer hair, ponytails, things which my generation, that is the veterans, very clearly saw as female dominated, has slowly now lost that gender difference. When you look at gifts, right, it's always a huge amount of things, a huge choice of items that we can bring for a woman, very, very few that we can bring for a man, right? What is the reason for it? Now, it's not that a woman probably can have a lot more of certain things. For a man, he's very, how many wallets can you give him? How many pens can you give him, for example? Right? So these are, again, differences. When you look at crime, we tell our young sons, for instance, or boys in the family, we say, do not cry aloud, right? That is for girls. We've already started socializing children towards being in a particular genderized kind of behavior compared to what is their natural self. It's fine for men also to exhibit, affection, to exhibit emotion. Don't drive them into small holes or silos where they cannot display or demonstrate affection and relationships easily. It's got to come out more into the open. And I think that's one of the reasons also that you find a lot of heart attacks in men and fewer heart attacks in women at the same age, especially at younger ages as you're getting it today. Men tend to bottle up a lot of stress. Women tend to talk about it a lot more. So it becomes a way of release for themselves. So let's look at this difference, right? Why does this happen? First and most important thing is that there are different levels of the testosterone that is always there in the body before birth, in the mother's womb that there is, which actually causes these differences in the brain structure. And I'll talk about it a little while later. There is also this theory of hemispherical lateralization. Those of you who are teaching communication, who are teaching organizational behavior, or if you're teaching consumer behavior, for example, we always talk of the differences in two halves of the brain, the left side of the brain and the right half of the brain. And we say that most men tend to have a better developed left half of the brain, and most women tend to develop a better right half of the brain. And I'll talk about that again a little while later. What does that mean? And like I told you, the child socialization, especially in areas like India, where we have very clear ways of saying, a child comes home hurt. If it's a boy, you'll say, don't cry about it. Go back and, fight it out. Or if the child falls down, you'll say, kick the floor. It's okay. You shouldn't be crying about it. If it's a girl who comes crying, say, oh, so sad. Who's this person? Let me go and speak to the parent. Let me speak to the teacher. It shouldn't have happened, and so on. You try to fight the battles for the girl. If she falls down, you go out and you kick the floor, and then you're immediately mollycoddling her to continue to cry. So what are you teaching? You're teaching the child that it's okay for a man to be able to be aggressive, to fight a battle at all times, rather than retract. Even if he is wrong, he will not learn to do that. He will not learn to step back. For a girl, it is always that there is going to be somebody else who's going to be a protector. There's always going to be somebody else who's going to fight your battle. So right from the child environs at home, we've already made it a difference. And then you look at the families. You look at the older grandparents at home. You look at the fathers at home. the way in which they are, like a father comes back from work, most people in my generation will come home from work, the man will come home from work, though both men and women are working. Man will go immediately sit down with his paper, the cup of tea will be ready for him, he'll put his feet up, call for water, call for a snack. Woman comes home, puts her bag away, immediately goes into the kitchen to be able to see what to be able to make for the rest of the family. So there's a lot of difference in the way in which they look at men and women at home as well. So the first thing that we must look at is this bit of aggression, right? What exactly happens? And like I told you, men and boys are rewarded and taught that it's fine to be aggressive, whereas girls are always they're always rewarded when they hold back. So they say, no, don't talk back. Keep quiet. Sit at the dining table. You're just going to be part of the conversation. You will listen to it. You will not be speaking, right? So we've already demonstrated that it's not okay to voice your opinion, not okay to be able to speak about it. We spoke about also the way in which boys and movies have a distinct difference, especially our Indian movies have a distinct difference to the way in which women and men are treated by the cinematographers, right? Aggression, you must remember, is a socially learned behavior. There might be some amount of paranoia as well as this kind of behavior that can be psychological as well, and which could have been something which is genetic because of the family. But a large amount of that, even if you say it is genetic, it largely is what is learned in the family, or allowed in the family, and therefore has been encouraged. So we have to understand the fact that we are equal. We would like an equal world, but we are different. How do we coexist? How do we accept these differences and use these differences to be able to make one concrete whole? There has to be a balance, right? The compatibility. So I'm going to go about it in 4 different areas. One is we will look at the physical differences between men and women, which could cause a difference in behavior and thinking. Then we'll talk of the brain difference, and that we'll talk in 2 or 3 different areas as well about the mental side of it. Then we'll talk of the behavior difference, and then the psychological difference as well. So this is on the right, the image that I'm showing you is the attitude regarding money. Why is it that men and women treat finance differently? Okay, so this is just one small thing. We don't need to go into it right now. Important for us to understand that for women, money is a lifestyle, whereas for men, it is a matter of winning or losing, getting more or getting less. For a woman, it is what is it that she can afford to do with it, and what is it she can bring to the family with that money. So there's a complete difference in the way in which you treat finances. Again, please, I'm making this distinction again. This is a generalization, and there can be exceptions to the rule. In fact, I found very good faculty of finance who are usually women rather than men. So when you look at the physical differences, men and women largely differ in their skeletal structure itself, their bone structure, right? You'll always see broader shoulders for a man, narrower shoulders for a woman, a narrower waist for a woman, a V kind of a shape for a man. There is a hourglass shape for a woman, for example. So one thing is the skeletal structure itself is different. Women, do you know, they have a larger kidney. They have a larger liver, a stomach, and an appendix as well than men do. All right. So which is why probably the way in which they function, the way in which, men react to alcohol or women react to, let's say, a lot of drinking of water, the stones in the kidney, vis-a-vis, let's say, liver problems, etc., again, differ. And I'm not a medical doctor, so I will not spend time in this. But important for us to understand that there are differences here. A woman's blood, and you know this, obviously, when you look at your HB count, you say that for a woman, if it's 11 to 13, it's quite normal, right? The hemoglobin count. Whereas for a man, you would like him to be between 14 and 15 is the hemoglobin count. A woman's blood contains more water and 20% less red blood cells. Until the 8th week of gestation, every human brain is supposed to be female. So the differences that occur in the baby, the fetus inside, really occurs by the brain changing in the last, let's say, the last 6 months of pregnancy. So first 2 months is absolutely okay. A man's brain is 9% larger than a woman's. I'm not making a comment here. I'm not saying which one is used better, which one is more effective, but we're just saying that there is a difference in the size of the brain as well. The main communication between the left and the right brains doesn't really occur. Remember, we just spoke of this theory of hemispherical lateralization, the left side of the brain and the right side of the brain. And this is very apparent if you're going to, going to a particular destination. For example, the woman will say, okay, let's take the left turn. We have to take a right turn out here. We have to, and she's reading a map. Not very easy for her to read a map two-dimensionally, by the way. But she will relate those spaces that she remembers to some incident, right? So that means that from the left side of the brain, where the information is coming from the map, to the right side of the brain, where there are events that she has stored. Oh, I remember this gate. Yes, we came here. Next to this is the shop where I saw the sari and I liked it. So the event is what is going to trigger where we need to turn right to, right? Then it will go back to the left side of the brain, which means that that gets imprinted into that event, which is that the two-dimensional map. She'll say, okay, now at this place, I remember we came to this ice cream shop. The children wanted this ice cream out here. And therefore, again, yes, we have to take a left turn out here. So what she does is she's translating, she's moving information from the left side of the brain to the right side of the brain and back to the left, right? So that amount of difference continues to happen for a woman. And we'll come to that in a little while again. This is the map that we said, the connectome between the left side of the brain and the right side of the brain. For a man, it is more unidimensional, right? So there's something that is there in the frontal side of the brain going to the memory, working memory, then to the long-term memory, then coming back again to the short-term memory. So he's pulling in data which he's learned about or he's memorized earlier. For a woman, it is about connecting the events with something which is a fact, right? So these are the 4 things we're going to look at under the differences of the brain: problem solving, thinking, memory, and verbal skills. So this is the theory of hemispherical lateralization, which I told you, the left side of the brain and the right side of the brain. Left side of the brain, which is supposed to be dealing with logic, with numbers, with data. The right side of the brain, which deals with verbal skills, with music, the arts and crafts, with emotion, for example. A lot of it is felt in the right side of the brain. Now, when you link your fingers together, and I'd like all of you to do this, just link your fingers together. There is one side, that is one thumb, which fits better over the right. You tried the other way around. It doesn't really fit as naturally as this one does. So how many of you, and you can please put it in the chat, or you can just, put your thumbs up in the sign. How many of you actually have your left thumb over your right thumb? Left over the right. You can just put it in chat. Yes, 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 for left over right. Okay, Vandana, left over right. Yes, Kiranmay. Okay, Aruna, Ashish, Lakshmi Prabha. All right, great. Now you will see, Dr. Nitin, great. So left over the right, which means now most of these people, most of them who have said here, except for Dr. Nitin and one other person, most of the people who said this are people who are women, if you've noticed that, right? Left thumb over the right means that the right half of the brain is more dominant, which holds on to the theory as well. This validates the theory. Most women have a more emotional right side, that is the larger side of the brain, which is there, is the right side of the brain. The people who have the right thumb over the left, more men will fall into that category, and that is a better developed left half of the brain. What does this mean? There are various things with that, which we will not go into here. Important for us to remember that people with a left side better, that is more dominant, that is the right thumb over the left, will want order in whatever they're doing. Logic, very good with numbers, very good with data, right? Very slow to get angry. But when they get angry, they do not retreat. They don't go back on an emotion very easily, right? Whereas for the right side of the brain, not very good with numbers, not very good with numbers, not very comfortable with money matters, very good with speaking, very good with communication, excellent with relationships, They'll get angry very fast, like that pressure cooker that keeps on leaving out steam very quickly. They'll continuously keep leaving that, giving that demonstration of anger, but they also retreat very quickly, right? So they also calm down very quickly. And so much so that because they have already expended that anger on that emotion or that angry, whatever that situation was, if the left-sided man comes back later on and tells his wife that, you remember that day you said this, and she says, I don't even remember, there must have been some reason that I said it, right? And that is what Dr. Daniel Goleman, who has done the study of emotional intelligence, says happens with most women, which is emotional hijacking. This amygdala, which is at the base of our cranium here, at the base of that is the skull, and before your vertebrae start, there's a soft spot. So if you touch it, you'll actually find a soft spot. Underneath that is supposed to be this gland, which is the amygdala. And the amygdala secretes a liquid when there is anger. For people who are on the, who have a higher developed right side of the brain, for example, they're emotional. So therefore, this amygdala secretes the liquid. That when it secretes the liquid, it covers the left side of the brain for up to as long as 1 minute to 1.5 minutes, sometimes even 20 minutes. Which is why during those 20 minutes, if somebody is trying to reason with this person who's already gone on this tangent and they're saying things which they don't really mean and they will not recollect later, there's no point in talking about it. A left side of the brain person should therefore retreat and come back to that discussion after this amygdala has retracted that kind of the serum, which actually is closing the logical side of the brain for the person who has a higher developed right side. So one of the things that you can do to increase or improve your relationships at home is to please ask your spouse or even your children or your parents to try and do this at home and just try and understand which side of the brain is more dominant for which person. And that will help you to understand why people get angry faster, cooler faster, why they like things in order. For a right side of the brain, disorder is the order. So they like to exist in chaos. You touch their table, they're going to get very upset. Say, no, I like it the way it is. Only I know where it's supposed to be. You don't touch it, right? So there are different ways of the way in which people react. So when you look at problem solving, and this happens, and you will understand this when you're talking about a problem at home, for instance, the man will, let's talk about a simple one. Let's say the maid did not come, right? So when the husband and the wife come home from work, and the woman is faced with this problem, oh, the maid did not come, so the vessels are still there and so on. She's talking to the husband and saying, oh, the maid didn't come today and now I need to be able to do everything. He takes it as a problem that has to be solved. For her, it is a problem that needs to be communicated. That says, all right, what she's trying to say is that I may be delayed with the dinner, or can you help me out with probably cleaning the dishes. For the man, it is a problem, remember, that needs to be solved. So for him, the first thing is suck her. Let her go. But the woman says, no, I don't know what the problem could have been. It could have been this illness in the family. There could have been some kind of priority that she has. I need to ask her. But the man has already made the decision because for him, it's a problem to be solved. And that is why sometimes just talking is not enough. Talking with an intent or with a stated objective is important, right? For both men and women. When you think about the way in which one thinks as well, a man is very used to talking about a problem and talking about just that problem. He focuses on that one problem and goes right down to the details of it. They handle a lot of complexity of that problem, right? And they can also separate themselves. There is something that is on. Let us say that a husband and wife have an argument. And they're supposed to go out for dinner. The husband is fine with saying, all right, we'll talk about this later. And he can go get ready and they're going out for dinner. He's fine with that. For a woman, it's very difficult to cut, right? For her, it's still there in her mind. It's an unresolved problem. So therefore, that kind of a mood will carry on into the dinner. And other people will say, hey, what's wrong? It's going to be very evident in the woman. Again, generalizations, right? Women are intuitively multi-skilled and also they can deal with multiple issues at the same time. So if the maid hasn't come, the lunch has to be packed, the children's homework needs to be checked, newspaper has to be brought in, the milk needs to be boiled. She's also planning out what needs to be said in the classroom for her lecture, for instance. She needs to also figure out, all right, on the way back home, I will need to go, and she's checking out the refrigerator to see what vegetables she should be able to bring home, or what will be for dinner. Her mind is processing different problems at the same time, and she finds it okay. But it's all at a very shallow level. Obviously, it's got to be at a superficial level rather than going into the details, because her memory bites are taken out on the width rather than on the depth of a problem, unlike what happens with a man. So if a man has to be talking about, let's say, accounts at home, right, the financial accounts, he's able to go deep into it and say, no, but last month, this is what we spent, this is what happened, this is why we need to now save on this level. A woman says, did I have enough money at the end of the month to be able to do it, or was I scrimping in the last 3 months? Then in that case, please give me another 20% more, right? So her solutions and the way in which she's going to go to a problem are very, very different. I would like you to think about this every time that you are facing a problem. And again, not only at home, at the workplace as well. Let us say that the man is preparing, a male professor is preparing for his lecture. Somebody comes in and says, hey, by the way, that class is empty right now. Can you go in right now? It may be more difficult for a man to quickly switch gears and walk into the class. A woman will say, that's fine, I'll go ahead and do something. I'll keep the class occupied. So you will see that habit of being able to move from one to the other becomes easier for a woman than it is for a man. But if you give a man a particular, let's say, an event to do, let's say that he has to plan out the next guest faculty or the next FDP, he's very good at doing it end to end. Okay, so this is again a difference. The reason that we must understand this, it becomes easy for us, for you all who are in administrative positions, to know who to be able to give what kind of job to, which is going to be easier for them, which is going to be more productive in the long run for the organization. Memory, and this we did speak about a little bit earlier, that men tend to use the strategies to relate to a particular task, right? And in fact, a man finds it very difficult, for instance, to stop and ask directions from somebody else. So he will depend on what he knows, and very often he'll come back to the same spot. A woman is fine to be able to say, look, I don't know, it's fine. Let me go ahead and ask. For a man, like we say, it's all about reporting. For a woman, it is about creating a rapport, right? So report versus rapport. A man would like to speak about what he has done and how he has done it. For a woman, it is more about how we have done it, where can we improve, right? It's more about most women are okay to be able to not grab the credit as well. For a man, it's not about grabbing credit, but he definitely feels that if he has achieved something, the true attribution should be there. About math and verbal skills, like I told you, the left side of the brain, the right side of the brain, men are very aggressive and they're very fast with numbers, right? They're better in math. They're able to look at the function. They're able to look at the dependencies and interdependencies between variables, put things together and say, all right, so therefore, if this was the budget at that time, we spent more on guest faculty, we spent a little less on this, we should be able to look at this. Or in the pandemic time, we spent a lot on, let's say, Zoom calls, and maybe we should be able to go into Meet programs. He's able to look at figuratively the comparison almost immediately and come to a very quick decision. So very quick and very good at problem solving. Women, on the other hand, are very good at explaining. So if there is a problem that is supposed to have been solved, probably the men would be able to solve the problem, but if the solution needs to be communicated to a larger group and convince them about a better way of trying to be with a process, it's much better for a woman to be the one to communicate. The third part, so we did physical, then we looked at the brain differences. I'm going to go now into the behavior difference, right? So we talked of why people are more emotional, women are more emotional. Now, all these things are going to relate to that as well. Sensitivity, the communication ability, the use of silence, apologizing, body language, asking more questions, as well as accepting opposition. So the first one is about sensitivity. Now, if you read a book that was there about, by Alan and Barbara Pease, and I'll show you the titles of the books there. in one of their books, and this is a couple who are there in the UK, but I have found their books excellent to explain the way in which when men and women think and behave differently as well. And even in Indian conditions, extremely good books, right? Why men lie and women cry, why men don't listen and women can't read maps, for example, very good books. So in Why Men Don't Listen and Women Can't Read Maps, they say one very important thing. And even Daniel Goleman in his Emotional Intelligence actually does also speak about this. He says that if you look at the way traditional roles of men and women during the Stone Age, etc., the caveman approach have been there, men have naturally been the hunters and women have been the nurturers, right? So when you're looking at a man who's going out to hunt, he is going to be very focused on his prey, right? So he goes, he looks for something, he goes, attacks, and he comes back. A woman, because she's a nurturer and she's looking after, let us say, the young in a cave, and there is a, let's talk of a snake that is coming in, or there is a lion that's coming in. She sees those dangers that are coming in at that point in time. It is likely that she is going to develop almost a 270-degree vision, whereas a man is largely a 90-degree vision, right? So even when he's looking around for things, he sees something in his direct line of vision better, whereas a woman has what today we call extrasensory perception. And a lot of it is because she knows that, in the room, there is somebody who's talking about me in this direction. It's a crowded room. How does she know? How does she figure it out? Because her senses are alive to receiving information both by way of space as well as auditory, because of that thing of needing to take care, right? So they have an enhanced physical alarm, the responses to any kind of danger or threats, whereas men feel that, I'll give you a small example. In a party, in case, let's say that, I'm standing with my husband and I tell my husband, don't look now. But there is somebody who's looking very sharply at you, 120 degrees, right? And I say, don't look now. But what will he do? He will immediately turn to look, right? Because he can't, it's not in his line of vision. Whereas if he tells me there is somebody who's, looking at you from your 180 degrees, just behind you, and I feel it, I feel that vision. And I say, I know, I can feel it. After some time, I'll figure out who it is, right? So there is this sensory perception which makes us more sensitive to alarm. And therefore, sometimes we become alarmed much more. That is, we become fearful much more. Women become fearful much more than men do. And therefore, that can inhibit the way in which we can raise to protection. So that's another thing. Another point here is also that women believe that they can communicate better. They speak to others much more about what are things that have gone wrong. They share and they don't mind talking about things that have happened even at home to their friends. In fact, they feel much better. That's a danger. And I want to warn all women about that, because that is exposing your Achilles heel. You got to be very careful, because sometime in the future, it can definitely become a problem, right? Talking of communication, at one point, there was this friend of mine who was celebrating her 25th wedding anniversary. And so she asked her husband for a gift. And, we start asking for the gift long before. And the husband always says, why should I be the one to give you a gift when it's a joint anniversary? You should also give me a gift. She said, no. First you give it to me. So he finally, 3 months before the anniversary, he said, all right, tell me, what is it that you want for the anniversary? And she was trying to be cute and clever. And she said, I want something that goes from 0 to 120 in 10 seconds. What did she have in mind? She wanted a Lamborghini, right? She wanted a really fancy car. Imagine going to 120 on our Indian roads, right? But anyway, that's what she wanted. What did he give her? Being a practical person with the left side of the brain more developed, more logical, he gave her a weighing scale, which also went from 0 to 120 in 10 seconds, right? So what happened to him? Do you think this was effective communication? No, because this is how he spent his anniversary. She could not take the fact that he was actually making a pointer at her weight. So one needs to understand that men and women need different styles of communicating. So if there's something that you really want to communicate, be very clear about it. Don't try and talk in riddles and expect the person to be able to come to exactly the same conclusion as you do. Now that's on the lighter side. But like I told you, when one is communicating, the primary purpose of communication is supposed to be to share information or to create, to come to a decision making or whatever, right? For a man, it is, yes, you're sharing information towards problem solving. For a woman, it is, I just want to tell you how my day was. You know, I had a problem in college. There were so many people who were there. Or there was this, I had to let go of 20 people in my company today. And I'm feeling really emotionally, totally bereaved at this point in time. She's just letting him know about it. He says, what do you want me to do about it? Right? For him, it is there an action that is resultant of that? For her, it is no, just empathize with me. So you need to understand about why is a person talking about it and what is an expected result. So get to that orientation well before in order to prevent any kind of issues or differences of opinion. When you are angry, right? Now, this is something that you will see happening in many cases where men and women are getting along, they're having a good marriage, etc. If there is an argument, the man generally retreats into silence. He will pick up the newspaper, he will watch television, probably the 1983 world match that we won in cricket, whatever. Pick up the telephone to talk to a friend. That's what he would do. But he retreats into silence. For a woman, it's impossible. For her, it is that if she ends a conversation without her having the last word, then that is a problem. So for her, it is that I cannot actually do something without having a last word. So listen to me. For her, the fury comes up a lot more. You know, it is that, how can he not be listening to me when I'm telling him or sharing some information? So this husband and wife argument that there is very often is something where she believes that he's taking the power because he's silent. Whereas for him, it is, I just don't want her to continue with this right now. She's gone onto the emotional hijacking front. I'm keeping quiet. But it's good for you to say, hey, let's have a cup of tea right now. And let's come back and talk about this in 20 minutes. Do not end it completely in silence. And for a woman, it's important to understand that if he's quiet, it is probably that he wants you to finish your conversation. And then he will come with his points at that time, right? With the emotional hijacking. So it's important, again, to understand what and why people are in a particular frame of reference. Apologizing. In our kind of social dichotomy that we have in, especially at home, I'm talking more at home because I think the gender differences come up a lot more clearly when we are in a more informal relationship at home than at the workplace, right? So that is why we'll talk more with examples more at home. So men tend not to apologize. They believe that if they apologize and say that they're sorry, they must mean the sorry. That is, they must say that there is an action that is there because of the sorry bit, right? Mr. Dasari, if you're saying something, I can't hear you right now because I will need to react to you later. So please go on to the chat and perhaps I would be able to respond to your question or your remark a little later. Thank you. So tend not to apologize because they believe that it's putting them down. And also they say, okay, if I say that I'm sorry, what is the change in my behavior that I should show to definitely because I'm sorry. For a woman, it is to keep pace, right? I want that pace of the conversation and I want peace at home. Very, very important. Remember we said about rapport. So she said, yeah, okay, I'm sorry. And this is not what I meant, right? It's more an expression of concern for the other person, expression of empathy. It's an expression of sympathy. So that is the reason why one needs to understand that sorry does not always mean sorry. So don't think of it as something, okay, he said sorry, so therefore he's admitting that he's at fault. Not necessarily at all. The third is that of, the next point here is that of body language. The fifth point here is that of body language. And here it is that if you've noticed, when men are sitting with friends, they will sit side to side, right? So they'll sit next to each other, probably watching a screen, talking about something, looking at the view, smoking a cigarette, picking up a drink, but they usually sit and talking of informal. They'll be sitting side to side. For a woman, if it is informal, it's more likely that she will sit opposite, right? Because for her, remember we spoke of sensitivity and signals that she's receiving. Body language to her is very essential. So she needs to look at the face. She needs to meet the eyes. She needs to see that the person is actually paying attention to her, right? It's a lot about connecting with the other person. So women are very sensitive to body language. A lady professor in a classroom knows which section of the classroom is actually getting a little disturbed. If there's somebody, she will get distracted easily if there is a section of the classroom that is passing messages, and she knows it's happening right there. A man might be focused directly in the central part of the classroom. He may not know what's on the periphery, right? Whereas a woman will envelop it. Again, go back to what we spoke about, that 270-degree vision and so on, and you'll see how this plays out in classrooms and in anything. When a woman is, let's say, waiting for a movie theater to open, she's bought the ticket, she's waiting outside, or she's in an airport waiting for the flight to take off, or in a railway station waiting for the train, the way in which she will be observing people around, right, is she's looking here, her mind is making a story about, okay, why are these two people talking? Why are these two people not talking? Why is this person who's with this person looking at the other person? Her mind is already absorbing signals from around, and therefore she will not find herself getting bored very easily, even if she's on her own. Whereas for a man, if there's nothing happening, people are not talking to him directly, he will pick up a magazine or a book and get into something else. He'll be alert, of course, for the sound of the train, because again, the logical half, right? He doesn't want to miss the train. But for a woman, sometimes she might get so carried away with the body language of people around that she actually may also miss the announcements for the flight. Okay, so that is one thing to look out for. This is again something which is, well, I find it funny, but at the same time, I find it very evocative of actual situations as well. So here you have the lion, king of the jungle, very bold on the outside, but look at the way he's crouching into the center, right? To the side completely. And whereas she, the lioness, if you look at her, her hackles are raised, right? This part, completely raised. And she's talking to him, or she's maybe shouting at him. But the way in which her body language is ready for war, right? You look at him. And that is why we say that when there is a very aggressive person in the workplace, and if it is a man, generally there is a balance, right? He cannot have too much of aggression all around. So it's not that a person who is very, very harsh at work is also very harsh at home with the family. Generally, it will be the other way around. There'll be other playoffs that are happening to be able to create that balance of his mind, right? He might be a little more submissive at work. He might be very aggressive at home, and vice versa. Same thing happens with a woman as well, by the way. The balance will be kept. But more often than not, a woman, because of the nature of the rapport that is required for her to work effectively in a strange environment at the workplace, generally she is more submissive. Generally, a woman may not be able to hold a point of view in a boardroom situation, whereas the man is definitely going to be able to go and emphasize it a lot more. So when you look at all these differences and you look at the non-verbal communication, you will realize that, you know, the men and women have different kind of spaces. The spatial interaction is very different. Women generally keep a little less space between them. So when they're talking to friends, etc., they don't mind, you know, going close to them and talking. A man will hold his head back. Even if his shoulder is close to the other person, he'll hold his head back when he's talking. So that spatial difference is usually kept. Another thing also is that when you see a man coming into an office, right, to be able to take a chair in front of, let's say, the director or the principal, he will come and he will try to sit on a chair that is almost on the same level as the director's level. A woman by nature, she will come and she will slouch into a chair to make sure that her eye level is more submissive than the person at the other side. So if there is a chair which is also a sofa kind of a chair, she will settle into that easier. than she will into a chair which is going to keep her straight back and on eye level with the other person. Sometimes a man who finds, and a lot of us use these chairs in offices in order to emphasize power, right? So when you are, let's say, like I've been a CEO of a company or a CXO in a company, I will generally use my chair to be a little higher and I'll use the chairs below to be lower. I've noticed that when men come to be able to want to argue with me about something, they will not sit, they will stand. And therefore, my reaction also needs to be that I also need to stand to meet them at eye level. Otherwise, there is a submissive posture of angle, right, which is there. So this kind of space and angle is again something which is used as a power definition more clearly by men than with women, right? Women remember rapport, men remember rapport, right? So that is the difference again. Also, women tend to look longer at their partners, right? Whoever's in conversation with them. So they look at them while they're talking, while that person is talking, again, look more into their eyes, etc. Whereas men, even while they're listening, they will look here, they will look there, because for them, remember, they are just using that one organ, the ears. They do not need to compare and to collate everything, all information together at that point. They're receiving here, which is why sometimes when a woman grimaces or she's making a face, it's completely lost on the man, right? So it's very amazing, very amusing to actually see a conversation of difference of opinion between men and women. Sometimes a woman might smile in a party or in a get-together. It does not mean she's smiling as a welcome. She's smiling to release her own social tension in that very formal atmosphere where she doesn't know people very much, right? So she's using the smile to break that tension. It's not welcoming a person or not saying, I agree with you. It's just in order to try and build an affinity. Whereas for a man, that smile will reflect that there is a purpose to why is he smiling at that person at that point in time. So when you ask questions, and I told you about this, I mentioned this a little earlier as well. If a woman comes and tells the man, for example, we need to go out this evening, he will ask questions about why do we need to go out? Should we really? Or he may not ask questions. He'll just keep quiet about it. He'll expect that the entire data has to be given by the woman. If the man is telling the woman, let's go out today, let's go for a drive, she will also ask, but she'll ask very explicit questions. And she'll say, why, where, what should I wear, who all are going to be there, what time are we going to be back, should I prepare dinner? So there are a lot more active questions which are there by a woman rather than a man, right? And they're more willing to ask that question, even when they're lost, for example. The last point here that we must think about is opposition. Like I told you, a man can have an argument and they can challenge the other very, very openly and say, no, I don't agree with you. And, you must convince me about it. And he doesn't mean anything by it. But it's just that he really does not, he wants to be convinced. He'd like that argument to continue. Whereas a woman, if the person says that, I'm not convinced about it, immediately she'll take it personally. She'll say, you don't trust me? So it's immediately moved from fact to emotion, right? And which is why, again, one needs to be very careful when you're handling any kind of difference of opinion. This happens very often after in-laws come home, right? So for a man, for instance, if his in-laws have come home and then they've gone back after a visit, he will think a little bit about why did my father-in-law say this, etc. He'll ask his wife, what did he mean when he said that? And then it's finished. For a woman, she may not even say at that time, but later on it'll be there, it'll be building up. And then finally she'll say, no, but your mother said this. She also told me that this is not the place to keep this. But she's coming to my house. Why does she have to interfere with what I'm saying? And she expects the husband to actually listen to her, but not go and tell his mother. But then remember that it's a problem solved, right? For the man, problem to be solved. So therefore, he might actually go and communicate it directly, which can actually create a rupture in relationship. So women have to be very careful about what they're going to be asking their husbands to do and what's the information that they are sharing. So this is an example again about the way in which men and women take a challenge. And this example is a story about a boat which was in the Indian Ocean where there were 6 men and 1 woman. and the boat was sinking. So they radioed for help, and the helicopter came. Helicopter was going on its way from Kerala to the Andamans, and so he did not know whether he should stop, but he saw these people flailing for help, so he let down the ladder, and people started clambering on. And as they clambered on, he realized that it's too heavy because he's already got a load in the helicopter. And he turned down and he told people, hey, can one of you at least jump off? Because I'm not able to get the lift that I require to continue to show. I'll come back and pick you up. So all these 6 men who were there and 1 woman looked at the woman almost automatically and said, and she said, why me? Why can't somebody else do it? But then they are not listening, right? Because they're already on their way up. And I'm not saying that this happens all the time. I'm sure most men are more chivalrous and they will naturally take a more judicious decision to say, why should only one person get off? It should be probably more. 3 of us should fall off so that we are there for each other. Rather than making sure that only one person who's going to be alone in the sea, anything could happen to him. So let's be more, or maybe they might make a decision who the person who is a better swimmer is the person to get off. They'll use different kinds of criteria. But in this particular example, they didn't. And the woman said, okay, you people want me to get off. All right. You know what? I've always been sacrificing. I've been a wonderful daughter. I've been a wonderful sister. I've always sacrificed as a wife. I've sacrificed as a friend. I've sacrificed as a mother. So, all right, if this is what you want, then give me a moment and I need to think back. And you also should think back about all the women who sacrificed in your life. And you should applaud for it, for me. All the men applauded, right? And obviously they fell off into the water and she was the only one left on it. The helicopter could go and drop her, come back for the balance amount of the 6 men. So what I'm trying to say here is that women should use their communication and their methods of negotiation to be able to work through a challenging situation. So do not give in very easily. Make sure that you can be smart about what you want without entering into an open war. But there's a way to be able to get your work done. And this is the last one, which is that of the psychological difference about emotion. Like I told you, men are not comfortable with showing emotion, and which is why you'll find that your mother is very willing to come and hug you. A daughter is very willing to go and hug. And, to hug either parent, in fact, when they're very young. But as they grow older, there is a difference between men and women. So the boy will not be so, go and hug people and say, oh, so sweet of you, etc. He might still do it to the mother, may not do it to the father. After some time, when there are 2 men, that is a son and a father, they will not openly touch, right? And they may not even say very warm things to each other. But they expect the other person to understand, right? For a woman, she's very comfortable with showing emotion, with displaying it, to showcase it in various ways, favorite food to be ordered or to be made, etc. when the son is coming home or the daughter is coming home. Very different methods. For a man, he's also not very strong when it comes to dealing with pain or with tragedy. And that is why you find, when I remember many years back when my mother-in-law suddenly passed away due to a heart attack. She was older and she had a heart problem for some time. My husband was alone at that time in Vizag, and I wasn't there with him. And he couldn't take it. So within 2 days after her passing away, he actually had also a heart attack, right? And it was his first ever. He was a very active person before that, constantly playing 2 sets of tennis every day, going for a early morning walk for 5 kilometers, all that. But he still could not take the stress of sudden loss, of grief. A woman is somehow more capable of dealing with this pain of loss, of people going away from home. Though she is an emotional person, she's able to withstand it, and she'll find other ways to be able to cope. And this is why you will find that in old age homes, it's very strange, right? In old age homes, you'll find more widows who are in old age homes than widowers. I don't know whether you've noticed it. But families generally tend to take care better. They'll always tell their fathers, for instance, who are bereft, that if he can stay alone, that's great. If he cannot, then why doesn't he stay with one of them? Whereas if there's a woman, she generally will ask to be able to go and stay with people whom she has a better rapport with. So her own age group, she'll move easier into an old age home. It's also that, we often wonder why a widower, especially early widower, why is it that he marries again so fast? Whereas a widow, I don't know whether she says that why make the same mistake again, but or a divorcee, for example, a divorcee may not remarry very quickly. A divorced guy will remarry very fast, right? And it's usually because he finds that he cannot really survive very well on his own vis-a-vis a woman. Again, a man, when you're asking him to, to introduce himself, he usually describes himself by way of what he does. I'm a professor of economics in so-and-so college, etc. So he creates an identity based on that. Whereas a woman will create an identity based on some kind of a rapport with the other person. Oh, you belong to Coimbatore, so do I. Oh, you're a Naidu, is it? Oh, okay. So, my daughter-in-law also belongs to a Naidu family. They will create a kind of an affinity based on other parameters, whereas a man will express himself more by way of his achievements or what he has actually been doing. Right? Similarly, also for a man, it will either be that if he is very angry, he will either showcase that by violence, by expression, or by just complete retreating. Whereas a woman will express that she's unhappy or she's angry with either a verbal diarrhea, like we call it, or that emotional hijacking, or completely non-verbal expression, but it will show. And it might be for a woman, for example, pressure cooker, having a few more CT, she'll shout at the dog, she'll shout at the maid, she'll express her anger by putting the vessel very, very heavily on the dining table, on a glass dining table. So there are bang the doors, etc. She will express her emotion in many ways, right? That non-verbal is equally important for her, but she needs to do it. That is that pressure cooker, which I told you, that relief of emotion that continues to be there. Again, like I spoke about, that men tend to think of a challenge that faces them because it's something that needs to be conquered. Whereas for women, it will be that person is facing a problem. What can I do to be able to help? Right? So it's more about wanting to be there for that person rather than, that's why when you find that, in these days of the pandemic, especially when there have been, I should say, unexpected tragedies in families, women are able to cope with it and know what to say or be there, whereas a man is already thinking, okay, so this was unexpected. Has that person made a will? Have their, bank accounts been already cared for? Is there an insurance that needs to be filed? He's very practical about things that need to be done, whereas a woman goes more into the emotional side of things. Again, when you look at men and women and innovation, it is noticed that women are extremely expressive. They are very good with planning for the future. They can make do with whatever there is. If there are suddenly 5 people who are coming home for dinner, even if there's no vegetables, she will do something to be able to make sure that it's there. I remember when very early in my marriage, when I had unexpected guests and I had a little bit of pappu and a little bit of rasam, and I put it together and I said, this is pappu charu. And, I added a little bit of masala, avakai masala into it to be giving that kind of a flavor. Whereas my husband said, oh my God, what are we going to do? Do you want me to order in? And so on. Women are very good with jugaad, right? That homegrown innovation, things that can just make do with whatever they have already available. But when this comes to the workplace and a woman actually comes up with something innovative, I want that women, and I work with Diversify, where we're trying to move more women into the boardroom, for example. We see that women are not expressive enough and not demanding enough that their own innovation needs to be accepted as theirs. That is, they do not take that attribution, do not demand that attribution, and therefore do not file for as many patents as men do. And I think we need to encourage more women to be able to do that. And a patent is not necessarily only in the science field. It can be in any way. It can be in a behavior. It can be in a solution, which can be just a method of or a process, any one of those, right? So it's important for us to be able to demand that we are that our innovation is accepted. So overall, if you look at everything that we've spoken about till now, you'll find that men are more independent. They will seek power. Women are more about communicating. They are more about relationships. You'll find men are more about their own accomplishments, their achievements. Women are more about connection. Men are more about social work, which is a hierarchy of power, to do something, to do good for something, but which is going to come back and showcase that they are in power. Whereas for a woman, it is more about a network of cooperation, network to do something which feels good for them, right? Also, men are largely externally focused. They are externally focused on what is going to help them, who is going to help them, and where. Women are more about how it is going to be helping them, and also how it's going to be helping the other person internally. It doesn't need to be something about what is expressed on the external way. Men also tend to talk to get the work done, whereas for a woman, they will talk in order to just relate to the other person. So they'll find out, "Arey, tumhare bhai ki ladke ki ye to," that kind of ways of connections, of relationships, etc. So, for example, if you look at my family, I am my mother is a Kama Chowdhury, my father is a Naidu, my husband is a Vaidiki Brahmin, my daughter is married to a Reddy, so my son-in-law is a Reddy. My sister's husband is married to a Maharashtrian. Another sister's husband is married to a Punjabi. So somewhere or the other, I will use one of these relationships to be able to connect to somebody else, right? Or the place that they belong to, not caste necessarily, but the place or the any kind of, it could be an affinity for food, it can be an affinity to the place that they are in, it can be the organization that they work from. I'll always look for those relationships to be able to connect with people. So this is a very important part of it. So what I think we need to do in order to make sure that there is not much of conflict between men and women is, first of all, understand the other gender. Mostly, I'm saying do not assume it, but mostly they will behave in this particular way, and why. Understand that it is not something that is personal, but it's something that they can't help sometimes. It's just ingrained in them, right? Identify a common ground. And please use reflective listening. When somebody is saying something, say, "Oh, I see. Is that what you meant? Can I just confirm that this is what you would like me to do?" I think it's very important to get to that level of communication. Don't assume that the other person has heard you. Like, remember that weighing scale bit, right? So it's important to clarify at all times. Also, get curious about the other person's idea. Somebody is coming up with an idea. Say, "How did you come to that idea? Has there been any data towards it? Is there something that can be validated? Can I help you out with probably a little more research on it?" And so on, right? So get curious, collaborate to be able to uphold another person's viewpoint as well. Don't look for a conflict in the other person's viewpoint. That's not the first thing. Try for that agreement, or at least some kind of a partial agreement before you can voice probably a difference of opinion. See, I agree with what you said about so and so. One point that strikes me as something which may need a little more clarification is this, right? So that's an important way to be able to talk about handing over a baton. The woman, if it's a woman on the other side and you are a man who wants to disagree, that bit of clarifying that, okay, this is something I need clarification on, but I like this about it, immediately she is going to be on your side. So she's already come to your side of the table. So use that "I" feeling statement, right? So if you're saying, for a woman, for example, when a man is late coming home from work, very often she just opens the door and she says, "You might as well have just stayed in the office. Why are you bothering to come home?" Right? What she means is, "I'm concerned when you do not ring me up and tell me that you're going to be late and we're all waiting for dinner, or we thought we'll go out for a movie, etc. I don't know what to answer the children, or I don't know whether I should keep your food ready for you." So what she's saying is, "I am concerned. Inform me. Keep me informed." It's not that she is actually trying to just pick a bone with you or telling you to really go back to the office, right? So please understand that men and women think and have this unconscious bias very, very often, very differently. I don't know if I can play a video. Let me try it.
human mind, we asked 22 people to talk for 4 minutes and recorded their responses. Feel free to participate also. Are you ready?
Okay, I don't think this is coming, but let me just explain what it is about. 1 second. So this is about a father and son who are in a car, and he's applied for a job, and the father suddenly says that congratulations on the job, I'm so glad. And then there's a phone call, and there's a call that comes out and says, congratulations, son, you've got the job. So who is it on the other side that is probably talking to the son? Because it's the CEO of the other company. And when this was asked, this is an experiment that was conducted, a social experiment that was conducted. Most people could not understand that it was probably the mother. They would not say it's the mother. They said, oh, it must be an uncle who treats his boy as a son. It could be a very good friend of the family. It could be the grandfather, and that's why he's talking to the son and so on, right? But they just couldn't believe that the mother is the CEO of the company. And this is the unconscious bias that sometimes comes up. I think it's important for us to recognize this, that we sometimes form this, that it cannot be a woman, it must be a man, and so on. So did you get that about unconscious bias, everybody? Yes? Okay, good, great. So okay. So when you find out, when there's a leader, and a leader is really demanding and saying that this is something we should do, that is something we should do, sometimes what happens is that the people who are talking about it admire a man who is so assertive. But if a woman is saying it, a woman leader is saying it, sometimes they say, she's too dominant, she's too domineering, my God, she's terrible. Because your expectation of a woman who's a leader is very different, right? But we have to understand that very often, and especially in the corporate world, I see this playing out all the while. These dimensions of the unconscious bias, which also therefore create a problem for the woman who then starts doubting herself, is a huge, something which can be a setback for most women. So I'd like you all as faculty members, when you all are going back to your classrooms and telling them, speaking about gender involvement to both men and women and helping them to be able to get ready for the corporate world, it's important for you to erase this kind of a gender bias in your classrooms. That's the safest place for us to do it. Yeah, this is what we just spoke of. So it's kind of a double bind for women, right? So I'd like to end with this, and let me stop sharing here. And I would love to take any questions that you may have. So can you give my other, Lakshmi Garu, can you please give my other, the icon that I have? Can you give me a volume there?
So thank you so much, madam. Am I audible, madam, now? Hello? Yeah, thank you so much. So dear participants, if at all you are having any questions or any interaction with madam. Madam, you are on mute. You are on mute.
Okay, because I'm not able to then hear you
Madam,
guys. That's the
can
problem.
you switch off your one device? Can you switch off your one
I think
device?
I'm going to do that. I'm going to switch off. Which one? One
It
second.
is, I think. Dear participants. Hello, participants. If at all you are having any queries or anything you wanted
Yes.
to add,
Can you hear me now?
you can just do. Yes, ma'am. Yes.
You can hear,
Yes,
but I
ma'am.
can't hear you.
Okay, same problem is repeating again. Participants, can anyone please stop? Whoever is present, Kalyani madam.
Okay. Any questions from
Hello?
anybody, please? Was there anything in the chat that came up, Lakshmi Garu?
No, madam.
Okay. Okay, any
Am
questions?
I audible, madam? No. Now I am audible, madam, to you?
Yes.
Dear
Ela,
participants, we will have one.
would you like to ask a question? Anybody? Please unmute yourself and ask some questions.
Kritika Sharma ji, Pranati.
Yes, ma'am. Good afternoon. Can you hear me?
Yeah, please.
Yes, Kritika, go ahead.
Ma'am, there isn't any question because your session has been so interesting that a lot of my questions got answered here. The differences, at my personal front that I've been having with my family members, so all of them got answered because I was able to understand that where do things go wrong from my end and, at the other person's end as well. So these are these natural existential problems, biological problems, I would say rather, which are there. And we just need to understand. It's just a matter of understanding. And there isn't anything wrong with me, and there isn't anything wrong with them as well. So I think this was a very, very interesting topic, and I'm glad I attended this session. And I'm really impressed by the way you presented it. It's not just the presentation, but your style of presenting it, which has, really made a mark on me. Thank you so much, ma'am. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kritika. That was the idea, that if we can understand why we say things or why somebody else is saying something, half the problem goes. It's because we put up these barriers in our mind and our perception itself then gets affected. Absolutely. So I'm glad I was able to open some doors, some windows. And there's a lot that you can read, by the way.
Right.
So much that one can read up about, especially this book that is there by Deborah Tannen, which is You Don't Understand Me. Speaks very well about gender differences.
Right, ma'am. Thank you. Thank you for the reference.
Most welcome. Dr. Nitin, thank you for the comment. I'm really grateful. Is there a question or why don't you share your own impressions about what is your takeaway from this session? What is it that you're going to be doing differently? Dr. Nitin? You can unmute yourself and probably come online. Anybody else? I thought
Anybody
one of the
else
things that
participants had
I always expect faculty is going to ask maximum questions, right? Because we demand that students ask questions of us. So
the way you are mentoring is very good. It is really impressive. Just I would like to put forth one question in front of you. Since we have, the topic is based on the gender, being gender smart and understanding gender differences. can you differentiate whether being gender smart is really reliable in case of rural women and urban women? Like what differences you would notice? Like what are the issues we are discussing from the last one and a half hour session? The rural women are better or the urban women?
So very, very important question that you've asked, Lakshmi Garu, and I think it's very relevant because we, the more urbanized we get, right? The more we move into a different culture, the more masking we do. So our entire way of communicating, our dangers of communicating wrongly also increase because our natural self is not exposed. Whereas if you look at the rural people, they're more natural in the way they express, they understand each other, the affinity is more, the rapport is more, they're all in the same milieu. So somehow I do not find that the dangers of conflict come up more there. It's not that there are no gender differences. It's still there, but the understanding is tighter than it is in our kind of a workplace. And especially because we have forced ourselves into these masks that we keep putting on. Like if you see about even Dr. Richard Bandler and what he talks about, we are constantly masking and unmasking, right? We are one person with somebody else with somebody, because we keep thinking that's what that person is expecting of us. But I think these wrong expectations are what actually create the conflict. Whereas in the rural areas, it's not there that much. You understand each other much more openly, and also people speak more often. They connect more often. Here we have these rigid, don't talk here, don't talk there. You are an employee, you are only a resource. You are not a person who has a validity to talk in this particular space. That person is superior and so on. We keep putting these dimensions on people, which could in fact impact conflict, in my opinion. Do I make sense? Am I making some sense?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you so much. And this whatever you have said is right. There is also another thought why you are expressing this, and also one question was posted in the chat box by Dr. Tirumala. She is saying that as illiterate people, we understand all these things by learning or by attending the seminars and conferences like this. But what about the illiterate people? Can you guide us from your side, whether you are having any, as being in a global talent strategist and being a woman and also being a human being, you are continuously pursuing for the empowerment of women, what I have gone through your profile. So in that particular lines, do you have any agenda program if something is there like that, where you can concentrate both literate as well as illiterate people?
So I think one of the major problems that we face, again, like I told you, is the fact that we assume. And I always say assume is nothing but making an ass out of you and me, right? That is ASSUME. And I think we need to, first of all, stop that assumption. Just because they are illiterate, we cannot say that they do not understand. I feel their understanding is more, and our understanding is clouded by the amount of other information bytes that we have put into our mind, which allows our natural communication to actually get defunct. Because we've learned that this is the way to say things, this is the way we should do things, so much of etiquette, so many barriers, so many things that we've already done. But if you look at the people, like when I talk to my maid automatically knows what she should say and what she shouldn't say. She has not learned it anywhere else, right? And it is that she knows what will irritate, she knows what will not irritate, but she knows what she needs to do. She knows how she needs to be asking for things also. So I think their method of communication, their understanding, she knows what she should come to me with, what she should go to my mother with, she knows what she should go to my husband with. So they already have created their understanding of what will work where. Look at children. Children are not educated if you look at the level of education that they have. How is it that they understand almost perfectly who they need to tap for what is okay to be able to go to the father for, what is okay to be able to go to the mother for, and how do they talk to the mother, how do they talk to the father? You look at a young child who's also looking at, let's say, he wants a bike, right? He wants a sports bike. I'm talking of a bicycle, not a motorcycle. And he wants that. And he knows it's going to cost a lot. Does he go to his mother and ask for it, or does he go to his father? If he needs to go to both, what is the kind of method that he's going to be using? He'll probably tell his mother how he'll be more safe on this kind of a bike, how he will be able to save time, reach home earlier before it's dark. For the father, it'll be how quickly the person will be able to go, the child will be able to go for to the school or to the tuition and back. The method of understanding and utilizing what will work is communication. And they're not taught by that, right? It just comes in automatically. But as they grow older, it is because we tell them what to do and we teach them the wrong things, in my opinion, that the method of natural communication gets clouded, and therefore it becomes more difficult for them. So I would disagree about the fact about evaluating another person based on the level of literacy. I think the level of communication and basic human understanding is far greater when they are not clouded by education. So knowledge, wisdom, I would say, is very different from education. And another point I want to state is when you stress that bit about empowerment of women, I have run multiple programs when I was working in Dubai, when I was working in the US, I've run multiple programs for people from different cultures. And it's amazing how men and women think almost the same wherever the culture is. It's just that probably the environment of India vis-a-vis the environment in Dubai, the environment in Europe is so different. But a woman from Qatar, a woman from Kenya, a woman from Germany, not Germany so much, but a woman from France, have exactly the same problems. In fact, you would have seen that during the pandemic, the number of cases that were there of women being harassed at home, violence against women at home during the pandemic was the highest in a place like France, much more than even in India. So we should not think that, the West is a much better place for women vis-a-vis men. And it is amazing the kind of findings that we are having right now. And also about the West, for example, I feel in India, women have reached the boardrooms much faster than they have in the US. Look at the financial industry. It was only recently that one person came up to the board of Citibank. But whereas in India, we've had banks that have been ruled by women, governed by women forever. Right? So it is wrong to say that we've had no opportunity. We have lesser opportunity, but for the skilled people and people who have been brave enough to breach the fortress, there have definitely been opportunities. And we just need to be able to encourage them. I hope I've answered the question, Lakshmikant.
Yes, yes, ma'am. Thank you so much. And I think we have even get answer of Charvak sir also. He's posted a thing that rural and urban communication is very difficult and how to evaluate. I think you have answered for this question also.
Yes, yes.
Still, any other thing? Any other participants want to interact? Any other one planning to add anything?
I think they must be all very hungry. Right.
Yeah, no, madam. No. So thank you so much, madam, for the wonderful session and guiding us how to being a gender smart and how to overcome the gender differences in a well-articulated manner. And I even thank the organizers, especially Dr. Ravi Aluwala sir, for bringing us such a wonderful personality, wonderful resource person on this.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you. And
all the best to all of you. God bless you.
You have a small announcement for the participants. Again, we are going to log in 1:50 p.m. and you are having a session at 2 o'clock. And as I have already given information that instead of the scheduled resource person, we are having Dr. Pramada Srinivas from Nikma Ripple. She would be speaking on work-life balance. Okay. Accordingly, you can attend this session for the post-lunch. Thank you so much, and we meet again at 1:50 p.m. Take a break for lunch, and we'll meet again. Is it okay? Anything you want to say or anything you want to add? Any other issues? Kindly let me know. Yeah. Then we'll wind up. Again, we'll meet at 1:50 p.m.